And that's the anger and the resentment and the bitterness and all that was going on in my heart. And the strange thing about it is I didn't realize what was happening. And as time went on there, it got even worse. Had an argument with my neighbor, and it's just one thing on top of the other. It kept snowballing. And I became such an angry, hateful person. I couldn't stand it myself. One day I went and called on a customer in the morning. I began to cry, and I didn't know why I was crying, so I left the customer's place before I even got out the car, and I went to Shoney's and I got a cup of coffee and went into the dressing room and washed my face and got my composure together and drove back over there. And as soon as I got out there again, I stopped the car and I started crying again. So I just decided to come home. And the whole way home I was crying pitifully, because it was like I knew what I was doing, but like I had no control over it. I was even looking out the window to see if anybody was looking at me, because I was crying like a child that lost a parent or something. And I couldn't stop it. And I got home, and my wife, Dina, she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I just feel so depressed, and I just feel so stressed out." And she said, "Well, why don't you go to bed and rest?" She said, "You just need some rest. You've been, doing a lot of things." And she said, "Just go ahead and lay down a while and get you some rest," which I did. But from there on, it went downhill. I spent 3 weeks in that bedroom. I couldn't go to work. I had the blinds closed. I didn't want no light coming in. I didn't want anybody coming to see me. That's the last thing, because some people would come and say, "Louis, gee whiz, you shouldn't feel that way, You got a beautiful wife and a nice home and a nice job and nice..." I knew all that. That even made me feel worse, because I knew they didn't understand me. And I didn't think anybody understood or knew how I felt. And then after about 3 weeks in the bed there, my wife came in one evening and she said, "Honey, why don't you come on out in the kitchen?" She said, "I'll fix something for you to eat. Let's just sit down and talk." And I told her, I said, "Dina, just get out of here and let me alone, will you?" And she went outside and closed the door, and I heard her crying pitifully in the hallway. And I went out in the hallway with a lot of anger. It was like, "Why are you crying? I'm the one that's hurting. Just why are you crying?" And she said, she says, "I love you so much, but I just don't know what to do for you." I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what it was. So I told her, I said, "I need some help." So we went and checked in to the psychiatric hospital at North Shore. And I spent like about 3 weeks in that place. As I was in there, they wouldn't let me alone, because even if I went out in the courtyard, somebody had to be out there with me. I didn't try to commit suicide, but I was sure thinking of different ways to do it. I couldn't do it in the house, because I knew she'd had to live there, and I couldn't leave all of that there. And I was thinking maybe getting on the interstate and crossing the twin span and step down on the gas pedal and hit the embankment. I even said a lot of times, I'm going to count from 1 to 3, and when I reach the number 3, I'm going to pull the steering wheel and hit the embankment. If the impact doesn't kill me, I know I'll go over into the water and I'll drown. They'll think it was an accident, and so she'll get, the insurance money and all. It was only through the grace of God I didn't do it. But anyway, I spent like three weeks or so in the hospital, and one day I got a pass, a 2-hour pass. And she came up to the hospital to get me, and she said, "Why don't we go home?" She says, "I got something fixed, and we can sit down and talk." I said, "No, I don't want to go in that home." I knew as soon as I turned that corner and I'd see that neighbor's house, all of this would come back again, this furious anger, that I had with this guy. He had no right to do these things to me. And so I said, "No, I can't go home." She said, "Well," she said, "You want to just go for a ride?" I said, "No, I'd just sooner stay here," because I was starting to feel somewhat protected in that environment. Didn't have to worry about phones, didn't have to worry about nothing. Nobody was coming to see me except her. And that was only for maybe 45 minutes or so once a day. And so I didn't have to put up with all this stuff out there. And I was getting kind of used to this environment. And we sat there for a little while, and then I told her, I said, "Well, why don't you take me over to church?" I don't know why I said that, because that's the last place that I wanted to go. I felt like, God's so good. Well, then why is he letting all this stuff happen to me? I didn't deserve none of this. I always tried to respect people and their property and do things for others, and it was like everybody's messing on me. I just, why is this happening to me if you're such a good God, The guy down the street didn't care about anybody, and he's driving a new car, and he's got a good job, and things are just going wonderfully, going on trips. And here me trying to do right, and, everything's going down. But anyway, she took me over that night to the chapel at St. Margaret Mary. The church was closed, but the chapel was open, and we went in the chapel that night, and it was really strange because, I know that there's someone there all the time, but when we went in there that night, it was 8 o'clock. There was no one in the chapel. And we went and knelt down right at the front pew, and I knelt down and I tried to start praying, like the Our Father and the Hail Mary and, all the prayers that I was taught to say. And I just couldn't pray. I felt like a hypocrite. I felt like, I have all this anger and resentment. I don't belong in this church, especially for the Blessed Sacrament. The only reason I didn't walk out was because she was still kneeling down praying. So I just sat back in the seat, folding my arms just like Father has his now. And I just started staring up here at the altar, and the Blessed Sacrament was in there. It had a candle burning on each side. And I started staring at the Blessed Sacrament there. And all of a sudden, it was like, this fast-forward tape that was running in my mind about do this, and why did that person do that, and you should have done this to him, and I wouldn't have taken that, and all that kind of fast-forward tape. It kind of slowed down somewhat. And I said, well, I think I'll go back to work, and I'll just do the best I can. If they fire me, they fire me. I'll go get a job selling somewhere else. I'll sell refrigerators, and that way somebody comes in and they say, I want a refrigerator. I said, what do you want, a white one or a red one or a blue one? It'd be that easy, and I'll do that. And then I said, yeah, I'll go back to work. And then I said, and I'm going to say a prayer for my boss. Now, when I said that, it was like somebody reached into the pit of my stomach and said, well, you fool, you're going to do what? After what he did to you? And I said, yeah, I'm going to still say a prayer for him. And then I said, I'm going to say a prayer also, for his wife and his family and all. And it was only minutes before that I was hoping that the company would burn down and he'd be inside of it, And I said, now, I'm going to say a prayer for my neighbor. And again, literally, this physical gnawing in my stomach, like somebody twisting my intestines, You're going to do what after what that guy said to you, I said, no, I'm going to still say a prayer for him. Moments ago, I was hoping him and his wife would get in an automobile accident, and I wouldn't have to deal with those people anymore. But I said, no, I'm going to still say a prayer for him. And for some strange reason, I just start putting people like in a circular motion. Well, I'm going to say a prayer for this one, and then this other person coming to my mind, years and years ago, what they did to me, and I'm going to say a prayer for that person, and I'm going to say a prayer for this. And as I was putting these things into circular motion, from within inside of this circle was like a dark spot. Just a total dark spot. And out of that dark spot came a thought. It just came right, I could almost see it coming out of there. And it came right into my mind. And it said, do it for me. And at that instant, the anger, the hatred, the resentment, the bitterness, the jealousy, and the revenge was completely gone. The depression was totally gone. I've experienced a peace that I could never explain until this day at that moment. And I began to cry, and my wife said, what happened? And I told her, she said, well, what did you do? I said, Dean, I didn't do anything. I don't know. It just like something just lifted off of me. I said, I feel great. I feel wonderful. And when I went in the hospital there, when I first went in, they ran tests on me, and they found out that I had a chemical imbalance, and that's what caused the depression. They put me on some medications that had some side effects, weren't too good, and finally they got me on another medication, and said it'd be about 30 days before it would get into my system, I'd have to stay on medication all my life. Well, anyway, I knew I was well. I knew. I couldn't explain what happened, but I knew I was okay.